Welcome to this episode of the Post-Christian Podcast. I'm excited to have with me two pastors from a church in Santa Barbara, Dale Swanson and Fernando Morales. Welcome, guys.
Hey, thank you for having
Thanks.
us.
Yeah, it's good to be here with you.
Well, I have a vested interest in your ministry. My daughter has jumped in as she's been a student there at Westmont and loves your church. And I was just so intrigued by how you are doing your Sundays. Maybe give us, before you kind of jump into that, share a little bit about ministry in Santa Barbara. What is it like? What percentage of people go to church, or are people open spiritually? If so, what kind of spirituality? Just tell us a little bit about your mission field.
Sure. So, well, first of all, a number of years ago, Barna did research with like the most unchurched places in the United States, and we are at the top of the list, if not the top of the list. So, very, very unchurched in this Santa Barbara region. I've met some church planners from the South that came here specifically because they looked at where was the most unchurched place to go, and that's where we want to go. So, it's a very unchurched place. It's a resort community, very expensive community. And so because of that, I mean, it's a rarity day. It's a rainy day. It never rains here. So there are so many things to do. The last thing people want to do is go to church. A lot of wealthy people that think there's no need for God. Another thing, a number of years ago, our church used to have like a school of ministry just internally for our church, the previous pastor, and he did a class on I think it was like world religions and local spiritual environment. And so he had the students in the class do a study of how many different religious expressions are in Santa Barbara, not like the variations of Christianity, like legit different religions. And at that time, that's probably about 10 years ago, there were over 300 different religions, lots of new age. I mean, you name it, whatever it can be worshipped is worshipped in Santa Barbara. So spiritually is a pretty dark place. And even for Christians, the temptation is church or the beach, which so it's really hard to get people to go to church. Fernando, you came from an area. What's been your perspective in Santa Barbara?
Well, it's definitely a mixture of different thoughts or even perspectives on Christianity itself. When I first became a youth pastor here, I remember going to the local high school and we were doing the See You at the Pole gathering where you pray. And I remember I was with the students and we were all holding hands. And one of the girls goes, hold up. To what God are we praying to today? And that just kind of told me everything I needed to know in my journey in Santa Barbara. So it's definitely a mixture of different, backgrounds. I think a lot of people are seeking versus, have been burnt up from church and then not going anymore. I think there's just a lot of new people that have no idea.
Well, and I love how you can capitalize on that, right? As a missionary, as a pastor, people are seeking. They might be looking in odd places, but if you can take that interest and start pointing it towards Jesus, and not necessarily the Jesus they may have rejected as a kid, if they grew up in the States, or their parents or grandparents rejected, not the worldwide religion of Christianity, but have you ever seen what Jesus said? Tell us maybe some of the highlights of ministry there, maybe a story or two of someone who's been on a search and found faith in your community.
Yeah, Eric. So I can just tell you one I'm so excited about right now. I had a gal the Thursday before Christmas this last year. Everything's kind of shut down for Christmas Eve. So I was the only one in the office. I walked here, so my car wasn't here. So it looked like the church was empty. And the doorbell rings, and this lady says to me, I'm not a member of your church, which as a pastor, I obviously know she's not. And she says, but can I talk to someone? And so she came in, 27-year-old gal who basically said, I've struggled my entire life with anxiety. My parents were born and raised in India. So I was raised a Hindu. Then after that, I've tried New Age. And this is what she said. God told me I can be healed of my anxiety. And he told me to come to your church. Wow. I believe in God, but I don't know Jesus. And there are people seeking. She was at church. But that was right for Christmas break. So I prayed with her, told her there's a place for her here, told her about some pastors that had recently talked about anxiety from the pulpit. So I gave her hope, told her your daughter's age group, the 20 somethings, are the largest growing age group in our church. So said, hey, you're in the right place. She was here this Sunday, cried, said she's so grateful, went to lunch with about 20 somethings from our church. and she is on her road to Jesus. And it's just, you're right. People are looking in a place like Santa Barbara. Wealth doesn't answer the questions. Good weather doesn't. And there are just more and more stories like that. Emails we're getting, people saying, can I come talk to you? People are hungry. And so I'm super excited about this young woman, what God has for her.
That's amazing. Yeah. What would you add to that, Fernando? What are some of the stories you've enjoyed?
Oh my goodness. I think it's the table that forces you to kind of reach out to someone that maybe you wouldn't normally bump into. And I've had many conversations, and one in particular that I can think of is this young Hispanic young man who reached out actually to Pastor Dale first and emailed him just out of the blue. I think he saw us on Instagram or something like that. And he came and he started just coming by himself. And then he started bringing his family. And I think he brought like his sister and his brother-in-law or something like that. And just recently I got to just sit down with him and talk to him. And because of the table, I got to find out a little bit about his background, a little bit of his family. And it was just really neat to kind of get that connection that I don't think I would maybe get, because of just sometimes our systems aren't created for us to spend more than just a couple of minutes with people, which is really sad sometimes. But I think the table really has helped us to kind of just sit down and talk, especially after a service or after a message where they have questions.
I want to hear all about the table. In fact, my experience with you guys in December was really unique. I mean, I just thought what you guys have started doing is in some ways revolutionary. I think there's something to it. So Dale, you shared the origin story of the table. Talk about what God put on your heart and how you're now doing services.
Yeah. So the journey actually began 7 years ago. I went on sabbatical for 3 months and just felt like I needed to have time with me and Jesus. So I wasn't going to like study to produce something for church, and just felt called to read the Gospels and just get in the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. So I'm doing that. And somehow, I don't know if someone gave it to me, but I was given this commentary that was titled Eating Your Way Through Luke's Gospel. And it's like, whoa, that's kind of cool. And in it, one of his points is the majority of the stories, not all, but the majority of the stories in the book of Luke, Jesus is either at a meal, on the way to a meal, or leaving a meal. And it led me on this journey. And when I came back from sabbatical, about 6 months post-sabbatical, we started something at our church called the breakfast table, because I began to kind of get a little bit obsessed with the table. And so it was a huge hit. If service started at 10, at 9 o'clock, our downstairs turned into a breakfast restaurant. And we served pancakes and sausage and coffee and orange juice for $2 for adults, $1 for kids. And it kind of blew up. Like everybody came. Mm-hmm. And we started telling, like, church starts then, not when the service starts. So I thought, how can I ever do that upstairs? We got rows. And so didn't do anything about it. And then COVID hit, and we're outside in our parking lot for a while. California, very strict, couldn't meet inside. Even outside, Fernando and I painted circles in the parking lot, so they were all 6 feet apart.
I still see those circles when I was there.
Yeah, they're still there. Partly, you saw we're in a neighborhood, so we really were mindful of our neighborhood witness. It's a very liberal city that was like, hey, don't spread COVID. So we wanted to make a witness that we're still worshiping, but we're complying. So after 9 months of church outside, our very gracious neighbors said, we're kind of done with all the noise. And and things had gone down. So we were getting permission to go back inside. So it started going inside. And my wife and another staff member said, you've been talking about the table. All these new people are here. Everyone forgot what church looks like. Let's go for it.
Wow.
So we literally got rid of rows. Oh, and we got rid of our carpet during COVID. We got rid of the carpet and put in hardwood floors. So we don't have to worry about coffee spills. So we set up all the tables, and the original plan was to do it for the summer and see how it goes. And now it's been almost 2 years, and I've been blown away by the response. Young and old, first traditional church people kind of like, we don't have it anymore. I think the thing that blew me away the most is I went on a vacation somewhere during the beginning of this. And Fernando, when he's preaching, said, hey, Pastor Dale's in Hawaii with family. And so I came back the next Sunday, and I'm on our deck, and this woman approaches I've never seen before. And she goes, hey, you're Pastor Dale. How was Hawaii? I'm like, How'd you know? And she's like, well, I was here last week. And then she said something to me. She said, I've lived in Santa Barbara for 8 years for my job. And I've gone to lots of churches. I'm a Christian. I never found a home. And I've been here 1 week, last week when you weren't here. And then she named 5 friends. She said, I sat with, and she named all these people. And she said, the table gave me friends in 1 week.
That's awesome.
And she's like 65-ish. I'm like, whoa, it's multi-generational. And we've found something that works, that people are longing for, community.
Yeah. And it's very simple. I mean, in some ways, you're combining the small group time during the week with Sunday mornings. I mean, basically, remind me, is it about a 75, 90-minute experience?
Yeah, about an hour and a half church service. And you know how every church has the, like, what do they call it? The shaking the hand of grace or fellowship, or different traditions have it. So our greeting time at our church has always been longer anyway. So when you come, worship for 20-ish minutes, and then that greeting time is around the table. Every other week, we provide food for the table, and we say, hey, now your greeting time's 10 minutes. And it's just simply questions to get to know your neighbor, the person at your table. And then somewhere in the service, usually at the end of the service, but sometimes even in the middle of the message, there'll be a point to go interact at the table. So, you know, if you're watching our live stream, it could still look very traditional church, other than you hear me say, now go talk at your table. You know, got worship, traditional worship, have a message, but we shorten the time of the message and give more time to like chew on it at the table.
Yeah. The people at our table were super friendly, incredibly kind, and you know, there are introverts. My wife is one of them. And you know, she, you know, kind of comes out of her shell a little bit. At first it's a little, wait, what's going on? I have to sit by people and talk to them. But it seems like even for skeptics and those who aren't as familiar with faith, that they seem to be coming back for that. Yeah,
absolutely. I just went to a birthday party recently at a bar/restaurant, and there were people that we were eating some burgers, and some friends brought some ice cream, and the table next to us, you know, kind of overlooked, and one of the people that was with us, they're like, hey, do you want some ice cream? And it just began this like cool little thing where like 3 or 4 tables just started sharing meals, and we were sharing ice cream, and they were talking about this and they were talking about that. And you think about it, well, we can do that outside. Why don't we do that here? Like it's kind of scary for people that are introverts, and we've had that, but we've also had testimonies of people saying, you know what, thank you so much for doing this, because it forces me out of my what's the word that I'm looking for? Out of my comfort zone to actually reach out and just talk. And it's really been really neat to see for myself too. I mean, even as a pastor, sometimes I can get a little introvert, but it's just been really good to kind of force myself to really talk to people and say, how are you doing? Welcome.
That's great.
Yeah, Eric, we had this gal in our church. She's been in our church for 10 years. And that first summer we did this, you know, it's okay, now go to your table and talk. And what we do for the extrovert and for the introvert, we also, you probably saw, we have chairs around the outside. So if people just are not ready to go to the table, they can participate in church and never go to the table. And we see all the time, people come their first Sunday, they're at the outside edge, just observing. And by week 2 or 3, they're at the table, but we give them space. But this gal was at the outside, and she's a mature Christian. It's like, now let's talk at the table. So she would walk past the stage and go, Pastor Dale, I hate that you're doing this. But then she did this, but thank you, because I need this. Like she was confessing, I'd rather just be to myself, but I'm so glad that you're doing this because I'm growing as a result.
That's really cool. Well, I thought with so many of our people who used to be involved before COVID, now coming irregularly, and then even fewer willing to do something during the week, and they're not in groups, they're not in community. This really is a one opportunity to really go a little bit deeper, and hopefully it bubbles into more serving. The website for New Life Church in Santa Barbara is nlcsb.org. Dale, what is another resource? You mentioned one book in particular. Are there other resources that you'd recommend for pastors who are considering something like this?
Yes. I mean, there's this, I happen to have it. This kind of led me to the first dream. There's this book by Leonard Sweet called From Tablet to Table. and just really challenging us to get out of technology and back to the table space. But that really inspired me for the church space as well. Yeah, that certainly helped me quite a bit at first. And honestly, I just challenge all your listeners and viewers, just Google the table. I found that there is an organization I think it's at Harvard University, that started this whole movement, like back to the table. Like our world's wanting it. You can look at there's communities, look up table dinners in communities. There are communities that are now, like during the summer, putting tables out in their downtown space and saying, bring your own food and come to the table. That's why we're doing it, because the world is hungry for community. They're not hungry for a lecture. And so I can still preach, but if we give them community as well, I believe that our world that's lost, this is more inviting, I think. Certainly in Santa Barbara, it seems more inviting than what we maybe traditionally do.
I love it. Thank you, guys. Keep up the great work, and God bless.
Thanks, Pastor Eric. We'll give Trevi a big hug for you.
That'd be great.
God bless you.
Take care.